Good afternoon. Utter pleasure to welcome you to Vignette. This is your exhibition, NIFT's own, on the occasion of the Silver Jubilee of your institute. We are calling it Vignette, a curated exhibition of Visvakarma textiles. As you would have seen on the ramp, the literature suggests that Visvakarma was developed for Festivals of India. And Festivals of India was a series of diplomatic cultural exchange program that was conceived of by Srimati Pupul-Jayakar, who is also the foundress of NIFT. So you see how the dots connect, that Pupul-Jayakar was instrumental in developing many of these textiles, and also the foundress of NIFT. So there is a certain amount of legitimacy with which we proudly present Vignette in the National Gallery of Modern Art. The gallery has been divided into 5 parts, and we start first with this one, which is called Cloth of Gold. And onto the wall, you have a magnificent piece which is done in Venkatagiri in Andhra Pradesh. And this particular panel uses discontinuous supplementary weft, which in common parlance we call as jamdani. Right? Jamdani is the extra weft needlework that we find in weaving. So the beauty of this piece is not only in the scale of the textile, but also in the flatness of the gold patti that has been achieved, and the beautiful chevron or the leheria pattern that has been given in this, and absolutely completely cotton. And you would appreciate that Vignette is completely art pieces or textile pieces which can elevate weaving into an artistic level. These are moving away from functional clothing of yardage or sari or dupatta and things of that sort. These were woven, commissioned, and made to be gasped at looking at it as a public funded art project. So you should also appreciate the ambition that a young nation has, that in the 80s and in the 90s, when you're struggling with balance of payment, hunger issues and poverty, a young country like India would invest lakhs and crores into developing public art and textile pieces. So many of the textiles that you see here have traveled all the way to Royal College of Art in London. It has been to Decorative in Paris. It has been to MoMA. It has been to many, many cities of US, 87, 88, the Jali exhibition in USSR. And so this is probably one of the first times in India in itself, and definitely the first in South India, that most of these textiles spread over a period of 10 years is coming for public view, right? The intent of displaying this is also to restart a conversation on how we can elevate textiles into art, and how you as young students can understand the legacy that you have, that you stand on the shoulders of giants, and from here how you build on, and when you move into the field, probably you will do better than this. And I hope some of you take that up. Right? So from this, I would request you to turn your attention to the back wall, where you have a tissue panel done in Benares. If you look at it again, tissue, text, technology, all of these etymologically have the same origin. And that's because the origin of our civilization is also about the evolution of our weaving and clothing as well. So I would want you to keep these square grids pattern in mind, right? And these are repetitive patterns that you see here, and it is done in tissue. And those of you who are familiar with weaving would appreciate that this kind of a scale is unimaginable on normal looms. So there are no joins anywhere, and these are commissioned and specially woven in special looms which were meant only for that purpose. So Cloth of Gold was conceived of as a beginning entrance to this exhibition, because ritually speaking in India, we do have a lot of significance for gold, golden color, gold jewelry. It's a harbinger of all things auspicious, and which is why bridal or newborns, all of them have a lot of gold and kasavu, zari, zerige, by whatever name across the state there is an importance, which is why the 3 holy grail, as we call it, of textiles in terms of Jamdani weave, in terms of Benares, and then on the floor you have a beautiful directory which has been woven in Kanchipuram. This has been achieved on Dobby, and you will see that there are repetitions, of course, but even the small repetitions that we have slight variations in it. So each of these designs do have names also associated with them. There is Nelly, there is Rudraksh, and then there is the kasha, the coin motif. And if you would look at it carefully, there is also the the chashme bulbul or the lozenge shape which is achieved. Chashme bulbul is what they call in the Middle East, but when you come down to south, then you call it as a kuilkan. Kuilkan is actually the eye of the nightingale. And that also, I mean, that particular motif also has a great deal of significance because, you know, it's supposed to be the embodiment of feminine beauty, somebody who has eyes like a nightingale. So Kanchipuram started off as a cotton weaving cluster, and it is from the influence of Benares actually that, you know, the brocade weaving comes to Kanchipuram. So, you know, this then serves as a design directory wherein, you know, it's almost like a sampler for many of the weaver service centers. Any young weaver also who wants to sort of get ushered into weaving, then it's almost like a menu card where you can pick and choose which border and which pallu or aanchal that you would want to give. So that was the first gallery of cloth of gold, right? And the second gallery is to your straight ahead, where we have positioned Kalamkari. Kalamkari comes from Andhra Pradesh. Again, Kalamkari is the tradition of reed pen painting on cloth, right? Kalamkari has the tradition of being the temple screen cloth. The whole idea of Visvakarma, when it was to elevate textiles into public art, was also to free or try and free itself from the religious domain as well. So you see weavers and artists who work on textiles, if they are freed from the compulsion of selling, if they're not bothered about, you know, who will sell and with that money, you know, if they have to sort of run their family and things like that, how much will they push their envelope? Likewise, I mean, if you didn't have to have assignments for marking and things like that, how differently would you think your assignment, so to speak? Kalamkari did make that attempt and an effort to sort of free itself from the religious domain. And here you would see wedding procession of Kailasam Garu. Kailasam Garu stays in Hyderabad. Unfortunately, he had a fractured hand. Otherwise, he was willing to travel. But he's in Hyderabad, hale and hearty, and absolutely happy to note that his textiles are on exhibition at NGMA. So you should look at the emotive detail which has been given. You know, the eyes are animated, and everybody is excited enough to go around with that wedding procession. So wedding being a secular activity, no gods anywhere. You have the bride and the groom in the mandapa. And even the banana, the plantain tree and many of the trees which have been given, there is a gentle sway to the tree which has been given. So there is a lot of vitality and movement and it's not static. So somebody is, you know, the grain is in the mortar and the pestle. Somebody is playing music. So the general hustle and bustle that you associate with a wedding ceremony anywhere in an Indian household, that you would see here. And if you would also care to see, every single inch has been filled. I mean, there are small flowers coming up in between. And, you know, somebody who is going to spread this on the floor and work on from end to end. I mean, even a normal canvas becomes difficult for us. So you can imagine the scale of this textile. And one of the other things that I want to point out is the green background which has been given. Unlike the other textiles which have their red or their creams, this has a green background to it. Now we come to Assumption of Virgin Mary. So it's not only that, I mean, you know, the temple screen cloth, but here they have actually, you know, pushed their envelope and ideated into taking on another religion and interpreting it with the same technique. So you will see a very goddess-like Mother Mary with her drapery and with her jewelry and all that, which is very reminiscent of an Indian goddess, which we see in our Amar Chitra Kadha or things like that. So it has a certain graphic quality as well. They have given it in small panels. And if you would look at it, there are 4 crosses which are at the 4 corners. But at the same time, there is Sri Ganesha to start with. You know, they would have started with that panel. And there is a wonderful mingling of religions, of cultures, of storytelling traditions and narratives as well, right? So you have the baby in the manger, the nativity scene of Christ up there. Again, you have the camel and the cows, very well-fed, bejeweled cows. And you have the entire text of the Bible going from the miracles of Christ, wherein he converts water to wine, and you know, coming to the feeding of the disciples with 2 fishes and loaves of bread, and you know, giving vision to the blind, making a dead person alive, So there are a lot of these narrations from Bible and the episodes which have been taken. And eventually there is the trial by Pontius Pilate, the Passion of Christ, the crucifixion, the resurrection. And all along there are, dancing hansas and peacocks and all of that, which is very, very central to the Indian motif study. So this is a fabulous experiment that Visvakarma achieved. And many of them went on to have fabulous private practices as well. And these sort of commissioned work is in the private collection of a lot of textile lovers across the globe, in fact. And then from Christianity, then they moved on to Buddhism, is call it. The crosses have been substituted with lotus feet on all four corners because that's what is symbolic of Buddha. And you have a Buddha in Padmasana here, flanked by 108 bodhisattvas. And in both the panels, you will see that there are narrations which are given in Telugu script, which corresponds to that particular panel and that particular column of story. So again, live episodes from Buddha are given across this one, and wherein he sets out the kind of sights that he saw, the dead person going, and the meditation that he did, the ultimate enlightenment that he had, and everything has been captured in beautiful graphic detail as far as this panel is concerned. So technique-wise, in terms of craft on the textile, this is the only technique. Kalamkari is the only technique where we have 3 pieces out of 25. So you should understand the difference between handloom and handcraft. Handloom is the weaving. Handcraft is what you do on top of the fabric after it has been woven. So this comes on the handcraft category, right? Flora and fauna, and this is our tribute to the animals, the birds, and the flowers and the trees of India. So first up, we have this magnificent piece of absolutely contemporary looking one, which is called as bulls. Bulls have been done in Weaver Service Center in Mumbai, and Bhupendra Desai and DM Shah have done this work. You should appreciate that, this sort of experimentation came out of Weaver Service Center, Bombay, because Bombay has a heads up as far as the artistry is concerned. It's one of the cities where art schools developed first in India, and design and art as an industrial discipline was also taught there. And it is the prescience of Weaver Service Center and the government ministry as well that they engaged a lot of artists, trained artists, degree holders in design and art like you, to actually sit with the weavers and sit with the handcraft artist, and from that confabulation and discussion, the kind of ideations that came about. Otherwise, if you would look at this bull, this is the kind of figure that you would see in Bhimbetka, the cave painting, right? Since we have all been initiated into Indian history of art. And at the same time, this is one of those scenes which you see every day in India. A bull with, 2 crows on top. There is one more like that. So it's at the time, every day, a scene, and at the same time, a highly artistic piece which is done in dye wash on cloth. And the color combinations, the vigor with which they have done the horns, the tail, the movement. Again, you would see that almost all the pieces have a great deal of movement and fluidity associated with that. It has udders. I don't know why it is called bulls, yet this is how it was originally titled, and so we decided to go ahead with that. From bulls, then we seg into this particular piece, which is the directory of block prints which have been developed in Sanganer. Where is Sanganer? Yeah, closer to Jaipur. It's in Rajasthan, and it has been developed by Radha Mohan of JK Arts in Jaipur. And this piece has been modeled after a similar directory which is there in Textile Museum in Washington. So that had served as a certain template or a model. And what I want you to keep in mind is this fish scale pattern. So there are 2 patterns that I've asked you to keep in mind. The grid one, which you saw on the Benares one, as well as the Kanchipuram one. This fish scale, scallop or scale pattern, what you would call, this also you keep it at the back of your mind. Now, what I want you to look at is the minutiae, the smallness and the scale of what has been achieved. If you would look at block prints that come now, most of it are larger. They are much larger, which is easier to achieve. But to achieve this kind of scale is very, very, difficult and painstaking. And the beauty of doing block print is also if you have a vertical line block, if you keep it straight, you get vertical line. If you tilt the angle of the block, you get a horizontal line. If you tilt it again, it is also possible to achieve diagonal lines with it. So with the same block, the number of patterns and iterations that you're able to achieve, that also depends on the imagination and the dexterity of the print maker and the printer. So so we did the bulls, we did the flowers, and now we come to the birds. So birds, this has been done in Weaver Service Center in Vijayawada, and again done in discontinuous supplementary weft called Jamdani. And you would see that on the tissue panel you have Ambi or Manga motif, Paisley as they call it. Paisley, as you know, is a town in Scotland, and it is one of those colonial encounters that made this mango Paisley, because it was woven in jacquard in a small town in Scotland, and that's how the world came to know about it. But it's a fascinating story of how botte in Middle East, which is the almond shape, is called as manga or rambi in India, because that's what our flora is, and then it becomes paisley once the colonialists have come over. So this is our piece on birds, which is beautifully done with birds in motion. There is one more bird which we have tucked because there was no space. So while you admire the textiles for what it is, as students of design, I hope you do take time to look at the exhibition design, the way lighting has been provided, how colors have been intermixed, and how in one wall you have the animal, the flora, as well as the bird. And that's how the curation has evolved, so to speak. Now from here, we turn to the biggest piece of this exhibition, the pièce de résistance, as they call it. This is the magnificent birds panel, which is done with hand block print, as well as paint. So you would see that in the background there are small birds which have been provided, and in the foreground there are large birds which have been provided. And this is done as a tribute to Dr. Salim Ali. Dr. Salim Ali, who is the bird man of India, and all these birds have been taken from Birds of India book. And there is almost a three-dimensional quality to it, because it is being painstakingly done by hand inside. So that's the bird piece. This forms the best backdrop for your photograph, so that's a heads up for the class. Tree of life, one of the most auspicious symbols of plenitude. A tree of life that supports birds, animals, fruits, flowers. And this is one among the three which is stored in the Crafts Museum of New Delhi. And you would see that, at the bottom of the tree, you have the water ecosystem as well, wherein you have lotus, wherein you have fishes and tortoise as well. And then up on, you have, blue branched trees which spot squirrels, which have monkeys, which have flowers. And you would see that there's a lot of motion again. If you look at the squirrel on this squirrel here, it's got midair, jumping from one branch to the other. So again, the dexterity and the vividness of the imagination to not make it static and to show movement in textiles, that also makes these sort of commission pieces extremely exhilarating to watch. And from here, then, we turn to the wall. Continuing with the flora and fauna, I want you to look at the flowers, which is onto your right. Though that's the panel titled Mughal Flowers. So the Mughal flowers, it has again a fabulous history. The reason why it is called Mughal flowers is because under Jahangir's reign, Manzoor, the painter, was commissioned to study the flora. And Manzoor's folios are available, on Bodleian Library's page of Oxford. And, Amrut Patel, the renowned artist, hand drew the flowers. Then the prints were cut on the wood, and then the block prints were done. Which is why this becomes a fascinating piece where generations are talking. It's not only Manzoor's flowers, then Amrut Patel ji drew it, then the block maker did it, and then the printer also did it. So it's a conversation across generations. It's also a conversation across disciplines of hand drawing, of wood block cutting, as well as printmaking. And then from that flowers, then we now go to the beautiful white on white coxcomb, which is mounted on the pedestal. So the entire exhibition design for this is designed primarily by Ms. Reha Sodhi, and also then developed further by our faculty team of Prashant, Sanjeev, as well as Ravi. And the curatorial advised Mr. Mayank, Mansingh, Kaul, and then again the faculty team sort of built upon it. So there have been, when you get textiles into your hands, each one of you will interact with your textile differently. Some of you may spot a flower, some of you may spot an animal. That is the perspective that each of you bring to the gallery. So the coxcomb, it is done discontinuous supplementary weft, developed by Prabha Traders in Varanasi. It is done on organza. Again, one of the beautiful developments of Visvakarma was to take Jamdani into silk. And so it uses white on white with zari. And white on white, if you look at the muslins of Dhaka, if you look at chikankari, all of them have that white on white sensibility, the lovely shadow and light play. And colorlessness needn't be unattractive. There's a certain elegance and there's a certain poise and class which is associated with colorlessness as well, and as this textile piece would show you, right? And from this flower, we go on to the petani, the yellow petani, which is here. This petani, you would have seen saris, and the absence of saris, Vishwakarma saris in the gallery is also deliberate, because we wanted to move away from functional clothing and present to you textiles which are artistic pieces. So a completely different sort of perspective like this, wherein you can imagine a panel like this framed in your house or in your study space and things like that. So yellow has a lot of significance in our cultural scheme. So you look at mango, you look at gold, you look at turmeric, pitambar, Lord Krishna, and Kesariya. Kesar is also considered very auspicious. So we wanted to include yellow in our curation, and that's how this piece was selected, which is also done beautifully with tapestry weaving of flowers on all four sides. Right? So we are going to pause our flora and fauna and get you into geometry and abstraction. And geometry and abstraction, we start with the first panel, which is the green one, that is the double ikat of Sambalpur. And where is Sambalpur? Odisha. So ikat, as you know, is the technique of So ikat, as you know, is the technique of tie-dye, wherein the yarn is tied and dyed, right? So there's a lot of mathematics involved in it, because you have to plot it on the graph, and then only as you weave, then the design becomes, whatever you intend, it becomes visible. So you have a green shankha which has been given, and the most important aspect of Sambalpur ikat is the curvilinear part of it. So you see the beautiful curves that a shankha takes. That is achieved in this. It has been developed by Sambalpur Bastralaya in 1981. This particular piece has been done by Chota Lal Salvi ji. And as you know, the secret of patola weaving rests only with one family. And this is the famous design called Chapdi Baat, or the basket of flowers. So if you would look at it, there is a central flower, which then goes on to take, has spokes. The medallion then gets spokes. So you can appreciate this for the small, the singular flower, the spokes of it, the medallion of it, and as a part of a larger grid as well. And that's where the abstraction and the geometry of ikat comes into play. And in this last gallery, we have a mix of geometry and abstraction, and we have a little bit of the flora and fauna as well. So we have the beautiful blue panel here. Many visitors I've heard that they come over and say that it reminds them of Starry Nights of Van Gogh because of the colors. But if you would look in, if you would go closer and look at it, the raidana, it's as small as a raidana or a mustard seed. So this is a directory of Petapur. So again, the grid that I asked you to keep in mind of the squares, that comes here again. So this is a third iteration of that grid system. Again, this is a brilliant directory of patterns, small dots placed diagonally, vertically, horizontally, and all these iterations with just the dot, how you can sort of multiply that into absolutely fabulous patterns. And if you would look at, many in your family who would do column and all that stuff, you start with dots, right? And then with the same sort of dots, you go on achieving different sort of patterns. So everything sort of starts with a dot, so to speak. And from that bindu, then we come here to Reha, which is a line. right? So the same square grids that you would find here, and that's how we wanted it also, how to juxtapose or place on counterpoint the lines as well as the dots. This is a brocade which has been done in Varanasi, and you will see that the shimmering gold in the lights, and you can imagine, I mean, in Royal College of Art in London or in Decorative and places like that, the beauty of this piece done in red, black and gold, which is at once very modern in its color scheme and at the same time uses the traditional art of brocade weaving of Varanasi. And the last piece of geometry is one that you would find on that wall, which is developed in Chanderi. You would see that it has the colors which are very important to India's scheme, which is lal, red, and neel, which is blue, and so the purple short color which you achieve. And if you would look up close, feel free to go and examine the textile. You have a central medallion which has beautiful ambi in the center. And those, if you see that central medallion has been divided into 4 and given in the 4 corners as conia. And if you would look at the borders, then you have the Qatar borders, which are again, I mean, very, very frequently seen in most of our panels and saris. This has been done in the pattern of talposh of Mughal times. So tal is plate, and talposh was what in Mughal times they used to cover the plate with. So it was a plate covering cloth. So if you would cover the plate before presenting, let us say, coins to the emperor or something to the emperor, then the central medallion comes in the center of the plate. So you see, design and aesthetics can permeate into our daily lives also. Even a plate covering or a tray cloth and things of that sort can be extremely artistically done, as this would show. This has been done in the charbagh fashion, wherein the singular piece has been divided into 4 squares. Charbagh is the same layout that you will see in most of the Mughal architecture, whether it be the Taj or Taj Mahal or the Shalimar Gardens in Kashmir. All of them follow the Charbagh pattern. So the flora and fauna that I asked you to pause while you were there, when I took you through geometry and abstraction, please marshal that back into your memory. And we start off with peacock's national bird. This is, Morkuti Pichwai. Pichwai, if you notice, is, if you know, it is the religious painting practiced in Nathdwara in Rajasthan. So if you stand here in the gallery, you have Pichwai here. And at the other end of the gallery, you have Kalamkari, which is also religious painting. There, they removed God in the wedding procession and took on a secular one. And in the other 2, they introduced other 2 gods. This was a perspective that, Mayank, Mansingh, Kaul, who helped me with the curation of the textiles, gave. And here, what they achieved was that it became symbolic. Srinathji, who is supposed to be an incarnate of Lord Krishna, peacock is a very, very central, bird which is associated with Krishna, because he dons the peacock feather as well. So the god is not there, yet there in terms of its symbolism. And if you would see, I mean, there is a lot of liveliness on the birds, the eyes, the sort of, vitality with which each of them are engaging with each other is very, very significant. And again, the beautiful colors of blue and red, as I said, you see that's how the blue-red comes here, and on that side you have the blue-red of the Indore Weaver Service Center panel. This is block printed, screen printed, and then dyed as well. And again, you see the red and the blue, the greens, the treatment that each of the technique takes. It's a very light sort of tissue panel, which is unlike Kanchipuram, which is known for its heavier silks. It was an experimentation that sort of never caught on, but I would definitely want you to admire the beautiful Annapakshis and the Hansas with the little stem on its beak, which have been given. Very, very rooted in its culture, but very modern in its technique. And you should remember that all these were developed 40, 50 years earlier, so to speak. And we come to the last piece of the triumvirate that deals with peacocks, and this is a Morpankhi Gyasar. Gyasar is religious textile, which is associated with Buddhism, and this actually has peacock feathers in its weft. So the color that you see there, if some of you would come here and see, the colors would be totally different because it's trying to capture the iridescence of the peacock. right? And it has diagonal zari lines across it. And this is part of panels, and there are panels which are done with heraldic motifs in Buddhism, like flame and tree of life, and then this would also form a part of it, and that's the significance of religious textiles. So you can also admire that Benares is also the confluence where, you know, most of the weavers are from the Muslim community, and the merchants are from the Hindu community, and at the same time Buddhist textiles also get woven. So that's the beauty of textiles. It unifies, and it, you know, takes that synergy along, which is very, very symbolic and representative of our country. So continuing with flora and fauna, the last three pieces, we have the horses, which have been Weaver Service Center, Bombay. So if you would, you know, juxtapose this with the bulls, you see this is again another animal which has come into this, the horses. And you know, I have always thought that Mumbai art world has a very strong link with horses. If you recall M.F. Hussein's horse paintings, many of you would have seen. So I'm sure, you know, those sort of influences of modern artists did rub off during the commissioning of the textiles. And if you would look at the communication design that has been done for the exhibition, which was developed by Professor Sanjeev CM, he has also, you know, picked his inspiration, color inspiration from these horses, keeping the jewel tones, and that's how we have, you know, designed the creatives in different parts of the gallery, you know, bright pinks and blues and violets and things like that. Again, beautifully, I mean, you know, ombre effective, you know, colors which you can see in terms of shading and in terms of vitality. And this has been done by Shamendu Sonvane and A. Lognathan. So we have tried to sort of curate pieces which are odes to the skill of weavers, handcraft artisans, and also painters and artists, so as to show and stress on the dialogue and the conversation that happened across disciplines. And from here, if you recall, I had asked you to keep the scallops or that fish scale in mind, and that you will find here in this textile, which is you know, beautiful tanchoy from Benares. You will see that, you know, you will have to move across angles to be able to capture the fish scale pattern, which is called the March Ki Suiyan in Benares cluster. So you would also see that, you know, Benares cluster has also got a lot of pieces in this exhibition. You have the blue tanchoy, you have the tissue, then you have the directory, the red, gold, black directory as well. A very, very fabulous blue which has been given here. And this was part of the 87-88 exhibition which went to USSR. Which was called as Jali. Jali is the lattice, the beautifully tessellation pattern that you see in architecture across India. That a singular pattern, but multiple iterations across to be able to achieve a beautiful pattern. And so then we come to the last and the final piece of our exhibition, the 25th piece of our 25 years of the campus. This is the beautiful birds and paisley. You know, very often I say that, I mean, you know, this birds and paisley piece is much like the doodleage that you guys do, right? But only thing is that this is 40, 50 years ago. And, you know, you would see that even the fabric is so beautifully textured. I mean, you know, first one, you know, appreciates the background fabric, and then one comes to the art of it, and you have the beautiful manga or the ambi in the center. That has also been filled with birds, and I would want you to take a look at each of these birds, which are as different as it can get. So there's a certain amount of graphic quality, you know, to the bird which is on the pedestal. And if you would look at that particular bird, the large bird, the designs which are given in that are different. And so you pick up any bird. I mean, some of them are carrying tender leaves, which are very, very reminiscent of the Pallava times. They are carrying a tender shoot in their beaks. Some of them are, you know, standing alone. Yet there is the iteration of the tender leaves all across. And then these tender leaves are also still modeled in the ambi or the paisley pattern itself. So, you know, looking back, you know, the entire 25 artistry of the 25 textiles is to elevate, and then the more you sort of interact and meditate in front of it, you will see more patterns than what I have explained. And perhaps then you can come back and explain, you know, what you saw in these textiles beyond what one has explained. So welcome to the world of the textiles of India, the heritage that you guys would have to build on compulsorily. Thank you for your patience.